And there I am, live on YouTube, live in the cafe. This is the Goldsmith. It is Monday the 8th, and it is Totem Week officially. Officially, tomorrow is when things get kicked off for Totem and Protem Cycle. We're going to talk about Protem up front here because Protem is a question that we have, or we've treated a little differently than Totem, in that we were really surprised today with the amount of Protem that was being dropped per Totem. The specifics of how the calculation was done, at least by Upland, it was different than we expected. So we'll have a conversation, or we'll go over what happened today with our Protem distribution. That has not hit everyone yet. Just a heads up, it is still cycling through. That is something that is going to work its way through, hopefully, fingers crossed, before things start tomorrow. And I fully expect at 8 a.m. 9 a.m. PT, before we actually have the opportunity to start activating our totems. Fully expect Protem to be distributed by then. And then, of course, we have to get into the special dates, the dates that we're looking forward to for this week. When this Protem cycle starts. Do we have a cutoff period? And we do. Do we have a cutoff period of what day we have to start by? Our Protem sale on Friday, if you don't have enough Protem, if you want to buy the Protem for whatever reason, or if you are in a position where you own a totem and you purchase it after the Protem drop. So we'll get into all those details, of course. And of course, just a couple things about your strategies or our strategies as a group moving forward into next week. Couple things about feeding, overfeeding, not feeding. Review a couple of the ideas of what penalty looks like. But more than anything, we've gone over those things. Big things are some of the new things. And then the two big ones, obviously, is looking at color and style, how they're going to feed, or affect how often we have to feed, and how much we're going to be feeding. And a couple notes along the way here that are kind of big news, small news, hope they're true news. About the feed and the interaction with the totems. Before we get into anything, of course, all views and opinions expressed by myself are mine and mine alone. Should be taken as game strategy or financial advice. They don't represent the game or the team of Upland. If we have any guests on, their opinions are theirs and theirs alone as well. Shouldn't be taken as game strategy advice or financial advice. They don't represent myself, the Goldsmith, the Cafe Nightly Show, the team of Upland, or the game of Upland. As we do roll through the show, we are broadcast on Discord and as well as on YouTube. If you are following along on YouTube, I do try to keep my eyes on those comments. If you follow on Discord, I try to keep my eyes on those comments. But of course, if you listen to recorded, please feel free to either comment on the videos or shoot me a DM in the game of Discord or the game of Upland or in Discord. Anything that you have thoughts on or anything that you're working on in the game of Upland. But kicking things off again, the big news today was our Protem drop. Protem drop obviously being something we've been waiting for I don't know, August, since we've known about totems. We knew that owning totems, holding totems, at some point we're going to get the Protem. We weren't going to get the Protem from day one. We were going to get it the same time we bought the totems. So we knew that it was coming, and we assumed it was going to come shortly before the start of the cycles. And that's exactly what we got. And what we got was today, seeing that A, we got the announcement of the amount, and then B, we've got this confirmation that it should be dropped before our cycles start tomorrow. Again, we started this whole thing off last week, last Thursday, with being able to know about, hey, we're here. Protem cycle is going to start. Totem cycle is going to start. Drop's going to be early the following week again. Today, we just still didn't have details, but we knew that we wanted to hold the totems we wanted to hold in order to be part of that snapshot. Snapshot happened between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. this morning. We don't know the exact minute, but we do know at about 10:20 we were given a heads up. Hey, snapshot's been done. Allocations coming your way, and allocation in the amount of 555 Protem per totem held. And a couple interesting things about this. We'll take a look at the actual announcement, but a couple interesting things about this is A, we had this idea, a lot of us did, that the type of totem that you carried was going to affect the amount of totem you're going to get as a drop, because obviously each totem is going to have a different amount of Protem required to interact with it optimally. And there's different totems that have different penalties, and the different penalties may affect how you are using the Protem. And maybe you're going to use more Protem on something that has a shorter cycle, something that is going to have an interval that is a lot shorter, making you interact with it more. Potentially, if you make more mistakes along the way, wasting more Protem. Again, what I see with this, here's an announcement. But what I see with this is that it does affect, an interesting part, and it does affect the people who have the best inputs, because we have to scale around the people with the best inputs. But it also takes the people with at the lowest income, the lowest input mounts, the things that require the less food with the least output. It gives them more breathing room, that if they make a mistake, they know they've got plenty of extra in the storage. Theoretically, depending on the scaling of interactions, maybe your lowest of the low, your lowest input, we'll get into where our inputs lie, but your lowest of the low input, you have a gamer's, let's go all the way to the lowest low. You have an elegant style, which means is the lowest input. It might just end up being that your totem cycle gives you less profit than the 555 or 555 Protem we've got up front. Again, there's no way to know any of this right now. We don't know what the profit structure is going to be, the yield on that input versus the output. But what we kind of have an expectation of is that more cycles that you have throughout the system, the more you're going to take profit, because you have more opportunity of input with output. So we'll get into taking a look at those in a little bit. Again, this announcement originally came out last week. It gave us the heads up. Today, 9 a.m., the 9th, was when tomorrow, Tuesday, 9 a.m. the 9th is when the start of totems are, when you actually have the input cycle starting. You have a bonus within the first 24 hours for starting your totems. You've got 5 days to start your totems in the cycle. If you miss that first cycle, the first 5 days, then you're out. You're out of this first cycle. If you start within 5 days, you're going to have your own 30-day cycle from the start date. So you don't have to start tomorrow. You do have a bonus if you start between 9 a.m. on the 9th and 9 a.m. on the 10th. You do get a badge, which essentially this isn't a language, but let's use it because Upland loves using it. I love using it. This is Genesis of Totem, and Genesis of Protem, and Genesis of this cycle to get ready for life. And I don't know if it's okay or appropriate to say this is the last one, but this is potentially one of the last opportunities. And again, I might be surprised in the future. There might be something big that happens in 2 years, but I think it's the last opportunity to really have that stamp of OG on there. I think people, in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, if life becomes a central part of Upland and people are playing Upland, interacting with the life in a 3D space, and that's a large part of what they're interacting with Upland on. And again, there'll be assets, there'll be solid state assets, there'll be transportation. But if they're interacting with life, it's still going to have this concept of, were you here before life started? Did you get that Protem drop? How successful were you during the Protem cycles? How did that, you started with your stem, once you had a stem pile, how did that affect your stem pile? And once you had that pile of stem, what were you able to do and start doing or start using it as layer after layer of life starts getting introduced in Upland, which we're going to see. Obviously, it's going to start small and grow, obviously the expectation. But what you do between now and the 5th cycle, and potentially there'll be extra 5th cycle of Protem Totem interaction, is going to determine what the future, your future, at least your starting future of life is going to look like in the game of Upland. So again, get that stamp of OG-ness, get that stamp of I was here before life was, ha ha ha. Get it. So start one of your totems within the first 24 hours. Again, my recommendations, what I'm doing. Again, there is a benefit to waiting. The benefit to waiting is, if you don't start your totems for that 5-day period, you have the opportunity to see what other people are doing. A big key thing here, as mentioned, with the style and the color, we know a little bit of scale. We know that elegant is essentially the most common, meaning that it's, as far as Upwind's concerned, has the least desirable trait. Fluid is the least common for style, which means that's the most desirable state. uh, Most desirable stats or statistics or characteristics. And there are seven, these seven variations along the way determining your input, and that's the amount that you're going to have to put in. Again, the benefit here, the more you put in, the more you get out. So having a high input is going to be a beneficial here. And they kind of already stated this scale here. So elegant, little tiny bit goes in, and then a little bit multiplied by the, whatever the output or the outcome is going to be your output. Obviously, you're going to have to put more into your fluid, but you're going to get more out of the fluid. So that's a scale we have a pretty good concept of. Again, the key thing here is we don't know exactly how that scale lines up. Upland hasn't told us. We know we've got 555, and we'll take a quick look at that. I believe that was live updates. We know we've got our 555. Here we go. Snapshot was taken today. 555 Protem. Watch out for your accounts. They will drop later in the day. Again, they're dropping in bundles. They haven't hit everyone yet, but they're continuing to drop as of right now. I haven't received mine, but I know other people have. So the like I said, coming back here, the 555, that kind of changes this idea of scale a little bit, where people question how much is fluid going to need? What's their input? Obviously, I think 555 is too on the nose and too much. I think that the team of Upland has built in some idea of a little bit of a safety net, a little bit of a cushion. If people make a mistake, if they miss a cycle and they don't get the outputs they need to get, they still have a little bit here to catch up on the input. And again, if they overfeed, oops, they lose it, then they would still have the ability to come back and have some in reserve. So nobody knows. There is no evidence. There's no reason to know exactly how Upland's math and the 555 works. I think that it is more than a single cycle of fluid. There is a theory that went out there that people are saying that it's enough to feed for the entire cycle. I don't think so. Or the entire cycle without collecting, I should say. I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to have to collect throughout the cycle in order to have enough Protem to continue to input. I don't think it's going to be on a cycle-to-cycle basis. I think you're going to have enough Protem, whereas if you don't collect after a couple cycles, you can still be inputting. You're still going to have some Protem, in the reserve to go ahead and do so. I'm pretty confident in that. But again, we don't know the details. We don't know where it sets. The only thing to watch out for or keep in mind, obviously, here is to get started in a way that makes sense, scaled. If you have elegant, don't think that it's going to be the highest possible input. And if you have fluid, it's not going to be the lowest possible input. We don't know where start is and stop is. One thing that we will know is the first time somebody does put in an amount of Protem, and let's say they have gamer as their style, and they put in 50, and it says, "Oh, I'm a starving totem. You didn't feed me enough." We're gonna know that gamer requires more than 50 Protem to, again, hit that maximum. Again, the optimal spend amount is going to give the optimal reward. If you are less than your optimal input, if you're less than your optimal input, you're missing cycles along the way. You're only going to get a percentage of the return that you would get otherwise. So here's how Upland puts it out. When playing, determine the optimal spend amount for each interval is simple yet crucial. Again, once you know. To calculate it, divide the total Protem input amount by the number of intervals in the cycle. This ensures you allocate the right amount of Protem for each interval, maximizing your yield effectiveness. With this language, the one thing that I question is if the Protem input is locked to the style, and let's say that Protem input is blank. Let's say it's 1,000, and again, it would never be 1,000. Let's say it was 1,000 over the course of the entire cycle, which let's say that's the case. Your style is going to determine the amount you're going to have for input. It does not determine how often you are going to interact, how often you're going to feed. Theoretically, you take your style, which is your total input from this language here. I think this is the case. You take your total input for the month, which is determined by style. You divide it by your number of intervals for the month, which again, this comes by the concept of the intervals determined through scale. Right here. No. Sorry, I apologize. Through color. Wow, there we go. Through color. Orange, brown, purple, green, red, blue, and gold. That determines your frequency, your interval of feeding. And theoretically, that you're going to feed every feeding is going to be the total input for the month or for the cycle of the 30 days divided by the number of cycles through the month. And that's a per cycle feeding. That looks to be the language that's being put out by Upland, which means that our feeding for a brown, let's do that, a brown gamer, whatever it happens to be, is going to be different than the amount you feed each time for a blue gamer, or vice versa. You have a different frequency. You change your frequency up. It is just going to overall affect, or it is theoretically going to increase or decrease the each feeding, because again, you have the same amount of food determined or feeding that determined by your color over the course of the month. It is just titrated by how often that needs to get fed. It's still getting the same amount of food in a month. Thinking about your cat still needs to eat blank amount of cat food. One cat might just want you to feed it every 2 hours, and one cat might just have a big bowl of food you throw at it, and it still eats the same amount of food. It just is able to eat out of that bowl and not puke up all over the floor because it overate. So that's again still a little theoretical here, but it does look from the language in our wiki. Again, I'm looking at the Upland official Totem wiki here. The language they gave us again was the optimal spend amount for each interval is simple yet crucial. Again, to calculate it, divide the total Protem input. I'm assuming our total input is determined by style. We can extrapolate what that number is once we start getting a better idea of what intervals are and if people are hitting the right feed per interval. And then obviously multiplying that by the number of intervals they would have over the course of the month. Because again, the input amount by the number of total intervals in a cycle. 30-day cycle, if you've got a 24-hour interval, obviously you've got 30 intervals in that cycle. Whatever your maximum amount is, let's say it's 300 would have been for the month. Let's say it was 1,000 for a month. You divide it by those 30, and that's what you're going to feed each time. Again, this is something that it looks pretty clear that's the case. We're going to be able to test the theories when we get right into things tomorrow. Again, we didn't get a real strong AMA. They tried on Thursday. They tried to give people opportunity to ask questions, but people hadn't gotten a chance to digest this. It was a free for all a little bit. People jumping in with questions. This question, which I think is key, is clarification on this, would have been nice to get answered. But again, I've got enough confidence in it that that's the scale I'm going to use. The higher rarity, again, fluid, painted, future, fantasy, ancient, gamer, elegant. Again, the order from most rare to least rare. The higher the rarity on that scale, the more the overall feed is for the month. And my individual feed per input feeding is going to be different than yours with the same style, depending on what I have for color to go along with it. So we're watching out for those two tomorrow, style and color. And strategy right up front is to try to figure out one or the other. You need to figure out both. So we are very much here we go. we are very much looking at this potential and the possibility here of just starting on day one, nobody knowing anything, somebody hitting a bing bing bing, you got the optimal amount, and they have to figure out their interval as well as that optimal feed amount. Which again they'll be able to titrate through there as well. So looking forward to seeing this get started. A couple hints on my side is I'm going to start one in the first 24 hours. The reason why I'm starting one in my first 24 hours is because I really want that badge. In order to get the badge, I do not need to start all 7 of my totems. So I am going to start the one, and I'm going to watch and see what happens with that totem. If I come over and take a look at my totems, I'm going to see a couple things that are interesting here. And we're going to look at it in 2 ways. This is over here on my totem bases. Actually, I want to take a look at. There's a couple strategies that I'm looking at with which one to start. And one of the strategies is, what can I start and play around with that's going to harm me the least? There's two theories there. If I have a low input, I might be more inclined to play around with it, because if I lose its output for the month, it's not as drastic as losing the output of my big earner. It's playing the small game instead of the big game. Take a small loss instead of a big loss, and then obviously focus on the ones once you have better feel and better for handling on the higher yield. And then the other theory here is if I can grab something that's going to give me very little chance for failure. And right here's my chance for failure. My chance for failure is my totem base. So I've got 4 variations of bases: hexagon, pentagon, square, and circle. Obviously, circle is the most rare. Hexagon is the least rare. It's the most common. And we expect the best to worst, or the worst to best, to follow that scale. Obviously the most rare is the best, and the least rare, the most common, is the worst. We go back to our announcement from Thursday. We can see a couple things right up front there that tells us everything we need to know. There's a couple hints along the way, and again, the value on these announcements cannot be missed. Again, we're going to figure things out along the way, but there's punishments or there are consequences for the lack of knowledge or making the mistakes that allow us to learn. And if I can avoid those consequences, I will. So I can avoid the consequences in a couple ways. One way I'm going to avoid the consequences, if I come down here and I look at my missed spend, not my missed spend, sorry. If I go look at my bases here, there we go. My bases, how they tie into my timing penalties. Again, with the timing penalties, each totem is going to have a unique spend interval. Early, late reduces the yield. With my missed intervals, I'm going to come up and look at my missed intervals. Here we go, my 4 variations. My missed spend intervals, this is going to be encoded by our totem base. So our variation 1 is that the future intervals are going to suffer a percent reduction. The more you miss the intervals, the more you're going to have reduction in the later cycles, and that could play in with the life form, with life form affecting where your best yields are, with some cycles, so some intervals later in the month potentially having much better yields than earlier in the month. Keeping that in mind, I probably don't want to make a lot of mistakes early in the month, because that could affect my big payouts at the end. Variation 2 is going to be every time I miss a spend opportunity, I miss a full interval, the life cycle of my totem is going to be shortened by 1 interval. So I miss an interval, and now I'm punished by losing another interval. So shorten and shorten and shorten, and I may end the cycle early. So I don't want that to happen. Variation 3 is going to be that there's no penalty until you've missed 5 full intervals. You miss 5 full intervals, and you're done for the month. You're not going to have any more interaction with your totem. You have no more totem spend cycle. You're not going to get any Protem in, any Protem out. This is the second best opportunity. The best opportunity is, well, you do what you want, and nothing matters. So again, the most lenient variation is there's no penalties at all. You miss something, you're fine. This is going to be ideal for people who are not going to constantly be interacting. You miss a bunch of them. You get interactive at the end of the month. The end of the month happens to be the best cycles payout potentially. Again, there are different cycles based on different life forms, but if that were the case, snap your fingers. You get the big payouts at the end of the month. Good for you. And that plays into my strategy for what I want to do, what I want to start. Again, one big strategy for me is to take this variation 4, which is the circle. Again, Upwind hasn't confirmed it, but we really do see time and time again. It definitely does appear that the most rare is going to have the best attribute. So variation 4, the circle, the rarest totem base, is going to be something that's going to allow me to play around, allow me to learn my totem, allow me to, oops, I missed the cycle because I didn't realize the cycle or the interval was every 4 hours. I thought it was closer to 10. I missed a couple intervals along the way, but now I haven't accrued any penalties because, again, I have this base, the base number 4, or variation number 4, the circle, which protects me against those penalties. So that is part of my strategy. The other strategy, obviously, like I mentioned, is to go and take the least valuable, the one that has the lowest input, and just say, who cares? Who cares about the lowest input? If I lose it for the month, I lose it for the month. It also means that I'm putting the least input possible in. I have less Protem wasted if it ends up being wasted. If things end up not being as good as we want them to be, if we unfortunately end up not getting what we want out of it, if we miss a bunch of cycles, we have the least lost, the least gained, the least 2 gain, the least 2 have lost. So what I'm going to do, if I want to go on that strategy, is I'm going to go look at my style. On my style encoding is going to be my second encoding. My first one is color. My second one is style. If I go and look at my style encoding, I'm going to go and see that we start at the letter A, and then we go all the way up to G. Is that the right number, right letter? I believe so. That gives us our 7 variations. So we go all the way up to G. So G is going to be my least input. If I come back here and if I see and I don't have any, I see an A in my second spot, I would be knowing that would be potentially one of my big earners. The C here is going to be one of my biggest earners. It's going to be the most expensive. I'm going to have to put the most into it, but it's going to be one of my biggest earners. So maybe I'm going to protect this one. Maybe I'm not going to do anything with this until I know a little more about what my input cycle looks like. And I might not want to use that until I've got a better idea of my frequency, how often I'm going to feed it. Again, they've been, looking at our color variations. We are going to be potentially looking at. Oh, there we go. We're going to potentially looking at this. C red. There we go. We're looking at this red being the third best. We don't know exactly if we're going to start with the shortest with gold or the longest with gold, but again, math would say there's a benefit in being a short cycle, so maybe that's where it's going to end up, meaning that I'm going to be on the shorter side of the 7 cycles with this red. I just want to know what that cycle is. I don't want to miss a bunch of them. If they're really short, or if they're every 12 hours and I'm only interacting once a day, I don't want to kill this. I don't want to lose that opportunity for that higher input, for that higher level of input here. So I'm going to keep that in mind, and I'm going to try to be more careful about it, more protective. So strategies are up to people. People are already thinking about their totems. They're already thinking about how they're going to interact with them. But again, if you can let this sit for a couple days, you start one totem, you see how other people are interacting with their totems, and we see what the outcome ends up being, we're going to have a better feeling, a better place to start that interaction. So first and foremost, I'm going to get some sleep tonight, because tomorrow morning I'm going to go to work and do my stuff and magically find time to get my totem staked early, or staked to my totem early, because I'm just excited. It's something I've been waiting for for 8 months, 9 months. So since totems were first discussed, when totems were put out a little broader or more specific, well, both broader and more specific, I should say. More details were offered. The breadth of information was put out there, but also tighter details, knowing more about how this interaction would be. Since that happened at Genesis Week, it's definitely been something that has been my focus, as at least as far as my excitement in the game of Upland. Now that we're here, I'm gonna carry that excitement through. You have 24 hours to get your first one staked for that reward. You have 5 days to start that cycle on all 5 of your totems, or all 5, all 7 of mine, but however many you have all 5 days to do that. But again, it is something that you're going to want to think about a little bit and see if you get some information. And the more you know, the less likely you are to run into penalties along the way. A couple things to keep our eyes on. I've already kind of popped them up here, but a couple things to keep our eyes on this week for totems. Obviously, we know that the cycle starts tomorrow. There is a sale on Protem. This is for 2 reasons. Number one is the Protem drop was a one-time thing. If you didn't hold a totem at 9 a.m. between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. PT today, and you bought a bunch today, those don't have any Protem to go along with it. You can go and buy Protem from Upland through the Upland store this coming Friday the 12th at 9 a.m. PT. The registration is the 11th. That is this coming Thursday at 8 a.m. PT. 8 a.m. PT to 8 a.m. PT. So that's Thursday into Friday is the registration period. If you don't register, you just won't be first in line. Upland kind of said there's going to be a lot of these packages available, so I would assume that they had thought about the number of people who might be interested and put it in such a way that they're not going to sell out. But we'll see. We'll see how that ends up playing out. But you have the opportunity to buy Protem. It looks like it's going to be USD. It looks like it's going to be a sweetener, and what that means is you are putting USD into the game of Upland. You get a certain amount of UPX out. You're also getting something that is not UPX, and that is, in this case, Protem. We don't know what that percentages are going to be. We don't know how much USD, how much Protem you're getting, how much UPX, but we'll figure that out. We'll get that information prior to that sale or registration starting the 11th at 8 a.m. PT. Again, that is how you get more Protem if you bought a totem after the snapshot, or if you went really fat fingered, typed 555 in, you have one totem and you just wasted a bunch of it in the first interval, and now you want to catch up, you want to get some more totem back, Protem back, so you can keep track of your cycles on that one totem you've got. So keep in mind that this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. The more intervals, the shorter your intervals are, the more times you're going to be feeding throughout the month. And that's kind of the reward and the penalty of having a short interval. Theoretically, the more intervals you have, the more input-output cycles you have. The way an interval works is since you have a start, at that start, you are going to put in a certain amount of Protem. At the end, you're going to get a certain amount of output of Protem back. You're going to go put your Protem back in. You're going to keep that feeding cycle going throughout the month. Some of those cycles, depending on your life form, are going to be different. You're going to have more at one part of the month than you're going to have at the other. These are not necessarily randomized, but they are assigned in a non-disclosed way. We've got linear, hockey stick, wave, sharp step, mild step, and static llama. Obviously, static llama is for the one and only llama, but linear's hockey stick, wave, sharp step, mild step, those are going to be assigned in a way that we don't know. We could always say that the rarer the life form, the better the outcome's going to be here. I'll be honest with you, on these output curves, I don't know which is better than the other. Theoretically, it depends on how steep that hockey stick is. One would argue that hockey stick is dangerous because if you accumulate a lot of penalties, then when your biggest payouts are happening, your penalties are affecting those most because they've accumulated over the course of a month. Some might argue that they're worried about having a wave because if they miss one cycle, maybe they miss their good cycle, and then they have a couple cycles that aren't big payouts, and then maybe they miss their good cycle again. It's going to depend on people's play strategy, but I'm going to say the best strategy is to feed every interval on the interval and to feed the appropriate amount, the amount that your totem is going to want. We've got some definitions here. We have certain things we're going to learn as far as the interactions. We've got feedback when we do our first feed cycle, so keep track of that. Press the button. You put your amount in once. You put your best guess. Press the button, and then you're going to get a feedback, and that feedback telling you fed too much or feed more next time. That is going to essentially tell you what to do in the next interval. If you fed too much, maybe back it down next interval. If you fed too little, obviously step it up next interval. There is one more strategy here on the feed in terms of how those penalties work. There is not a major penalty for refeeding inside the same cycle. There's not a major penalty for over. The way the penalty works for overfeeding is anything you fed over the optimal amount, it's gone. It's just like putting more food in the bowl than the dog's going to eat, except the second the dog's done eating, he's going to urinate. Who knows? He's going to ruin the rest of his food. So you go clean the bowl out, you put the food back in. Hopefully this time you put in the right amount. He eats his food. There's none for him to waste at the end. So that's what we're looking at there with that concept. There is that theory that if you put in way too little intentionally, then you put in a little more, and then you put in a little more until it tells you did the right amount. You could do that during your first cycle. The problem is that you only capture the highest feed amount. Everything else is considered excess food or excess feeding and is gone to the wayside. Only the highest feed during that interval is going to count. Well, there's a bunch of strategies. There's a couple ways of doing it. People playing one cycle after the other, doing them differently. Keep in mind, most of our pay cycles are going to be worked towards or going to be weighted towards the end of the cycle or towards the end of the cycle. So if you make a couple mistakes up front, it's less of a risk potentially than later on down the line. That's a theory here. That's one I'm going to be working on. I'm going to make a couple mistakes up front, but again, being a little bit strategic with what I make the mistakes with. I will say right now that I think that the decision I'm making is to go with a circle base. That way, any mistakes I make up front are going to have less effect for me later in the month. Once I have a better idea of the optimal feed, and I can continue to feed that circle-based goat. Once I have a better idea of the optimal feed, I will do it for the rest of the month and call it a day. Once I figure out the cycle, again, right on pace, but I'm not going to have to carry that major penalty for for feeding or missing feedings along the way, because again, I have the best or the least significant effect penalty, and I'll appreciate that. So take a look at the strategies between now and tomorrow. Think what's going to work for you. If you got multiple totems, be strategic about which one you start and keep your eyes open. We'll figure out over the course of the next 3 or 4 days what optimal feed might look like over the course of a month. I'm sure that we're going to see, like I said, if the information here from Upland is correct, which I think it is, if the information here from Upland is correct, your optimal spend amount for each interval is not going to be the same as the optimal spend amount for each interval for all of the same styles as you. It's going to vary based on a combination of your style and scale. So keep that in mind. Oh, sorry, style and color. Wow, I keep doing that. Style and color. So keep that in mind. Plan on doing the math. Plan on being prepared to do so, and be ready for it. One other thing I do want to put out there again is it looks like a lot. It is a lot. I think that the likelihood is going to be that if you participate and you don't have optimal results, you're probably still going to have a positive yield. These effects that diminish the return obviously are scaled. If you go through a few cycles and things don't work out, theoretically you're going to be working closer to optimal. If you get to optimal, obviously without without penalties and with less penalties, you are going to be potentially doing better output and generating a profit. If this is too much for people, I will tell you, I was surprised as how large the Protem drop is. If you had a bunch of really, I mean, you had a bunch of totems that just they wouldn't have had large input anyways. You had a bunch of elegance, you weren't going to have a large input anyways, and now you get this 555. Maybe that is enough to just say, hey, I just want to sit on this 555. I got lucky in the 555 drop. The upland chose to do the math that way. That the style of my particular totem did not matter that much, and then just smile and take it. Again, this is going to be a game of multiple strategies. We'll have to see what people decide to do and how people decide to run it through the month. But more than anything, have fun. That's what I'm looking forward to doing. For tonight, thank you so much for being here. I rambled longer than I meant to, but I will put out that there's plenty more conversation to have. Once we do start the cycles and start to see results, love to circle back, hear what people have to say, see their experiences. I put out this idea of building your own Excel sheet. Build your own Excel sheet. Keep track of when you last fed, what the results were, what amount you put in. It's possible to forget. Put in what you last fed and the result. Said you fed too little. Okay, next time feed more. If you fed too often and it's not the cycle yet, then oops, I got to figure out how many hours it is to get the cycle. Be prepared to put a little bit of effort in. I think the yield, the rewards are going to be worth it, and hopefully you enjoy it. Again, Tamagotchis are stressful as hell, but people did them because they enjoyed them. And here's your little Tamagotchi with some reward on the backside. Thank you, everyone, again. Mics are open. The floor is yours. Enjoy it.